Namaskar. A warm welcome to World News and Indian Perspective on All India Radio. This is Abhijit Loreng and with me is Aditi Lumba, bringing glimpses of the major developments of the day from across the globe. Over the next half an hour, we shall bring you the latest from the world of politics, economy, sports, entertainment and more. The headlines. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi inaugurates Deoghar Airport in Jharkhand, unveils several series of development projects over 16,000 crore rupees. India is among the fastest growing economies in the world, says Home Minister Amit Shah. Sri Lankan President Gotabaya Rajapaksa signs his resignation letter. First I2U2 India-Israel-UAE-USA leaders virtual summit to be held on Thursday. At least 68 people killed in Pakistan's Karachi city and neighbouring Balochistan province as torrential rains and flash floods batter the area. In cricket, India thrashed England by 10 wickets in opening one-day international at Kennington Oval in London. BCCI announces Indian women's cricket team for the upcoming Commonwealth Games in Birmingham, and Indian grapplers bagged 22 medals in Asian Under-20 Wrestling Championships in Manama in Bahrain. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi inaugurated and laid the foundation stone of various developmental projects worth more than 16,800 crore rupees in Deoghar, Jharkhand on Tuesday. Addressing a public rally at Deoghar College Ground, the Prime Minister said the government is investing in religious places to keep India's culture and faith intact for next generations. Mr. Modi said all religious places developed with advanced facilities have attracted more number of tourists and devotees. Modern facilities have also been expanded in Baba Baidyanath Dham under the Prasad scheme. Citing example of Varanasi-Kashi corridor, Mr. Modi said it has helped increase the business for small vendors, sellers and artisans.
आज ये समय की मांग है कि भारत अपनी विरासत को ज्यादा से ज्यादा और तेजी के साथ संरक्षित करे, वहां आधुनिक सुविधाएं बढ़ाए। जिन भी तीर्थ स्थलों को आधुनिक सुविधाओं से जोड़ा गया, वहां यात्रियों की संख्या, पर्यटकों की संख्या अनेक गुना बढ़ गई है.
The Prime Minister said the government has been working hard to bring about the development in all backward areas of the country. He said for the last 8 years, the government has been working with the thinking of development of nation by the development of states. The same thinking and spirit have been paramount in our efforts to connect Jharkhand by highways, railways, airways and waterways. He said all these facilities will positively impact the economic development of the state. The Prime Minister expressed happiness that flights for Ranchi, Delhi and Patna will start soon.
मुझे खुशी है कि आज देवघर से कोलकाता के लिए फ्लाइट शुरू हो चुकी है. रांची, पटना और दिल्ली के लिए भी जल्द से जल्द फ्लाइट शुरू हो, इसके लिए भी प्रयास चल रहे हैं. देवघर के बाद बोकारो और दुमका में भी एयरपोर्ट के निर्माण पर काम चल रहा है. यानी झारखंड में आने वाले समय में कनेक्टिविटी निरंतर और बेहतर होने वाली है.
The Prime Minister said new avenues of development, employment, self-employment are being discovered by investing in infrastructure. Later addressing the closing ceremony of centenary celebrations of Bihar Legislative Assembly in Patna, the Prime Minister exhorted people's representatives to unite for national interest. Mr. Modi said legislature should adopt positive attitude towards issues related to the common people. The Prime Minister said the 21st century is India's century, but this is the century of duties for India. Home Minister Amit Shah has said that India is among the fastest growing economies in the world. He was speaking at the 6th National Conclave on Mines and Minerals in New Delhi on Tuesday. Mr. Shah said after COVID, many countries are facing recession. He said India is also facing the heat of recession and inflation, but compared to the world, India is safe due to the policies made by the government under the leadership of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. He said India has controlled the inflation compared to the world. Mr. Shah said government has taken slew of measures to bring policy reforms in the mining sector, which resulted in the higher production of minerals in the country. He stressed on the balanced utilization of mines and minerals. He said government has brought transparency in the auctioning of mines, which ended corruption.
Sri Lankan President Gotabaya Rajapaksa has signed his resignation letter and the Speaker of Parliament will publicly announce it to the nation on Wednesday. The Sri Lanka newspapers reported that the resignation was signed and handed over to a senior government official who will hand it over to Speaker Mahinda Yapa Abeyewardena. The President's resignation is expected to pave way for the establishment of an interim all-party government to resolve the current economic crisis. Earlier, representatives of the Go Home Gota campaign at the Gale Face Green in Colombo held a discussion with all party leaders on the future political course of crisis-stricken Sri Lanka. Gotabaya Rajapaksa fled the President's house shortly before thousands of protesters stormed it on Saturday. The Go Home Gota protest campaign, which is underway for the 95th consecutive day, has been calling for the resignation of the President, Prime Minister and the government, as well as the appointment of an interim all-party government, among other key demands. Meanwhile, UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has urged all stakeholders to engage in dialogue to ensure smooth transition of government. He condemned all acts of violence in Sri Lanka and called for those responsible to be held accountable. In today's Hot Spot section, we bring you a discussion on the developments in Sri Lanka. In conversation are Yogendra Kumar, former ambassador, and Simran Sodhi, journalist.
Ambassador Kumar, when you look at what is happening in Sri Lanka, how do you assess the situation?
Well, the Sri Lankan situation, of course, is very worrisome. More so because I would actually put it like this, that actually it is more a political crisis to begin with, which is manifesting itself into an economic crisis. And both these crises sort of, in a way, conflating, it's leading practically to the collapse of the government in Sri Lanka. So the coming weeks are going to be quite uncertain because, as you know, that the present government has been overthrown, literally, by a mass upsurge of people, ordinary people who actually did that. Initially, it was some parties were involved in that, but basically then when the economic crisis really got worse, then there was a kind of a students and general public, and many of them around June had a kind of a several dozen people set up a kind of a Facebook kind of a network. As a result of it, they're able to spread word all around that unless the present leadership actually dislodged from power, there is no possibility of any kind of improvement in the condition. But not actually more than just the present leadership. It is actually in a way a distrust of the political elite in Sri Lanka because of the fact that the political parties are highly fragmented there. You know, the dynastic politics, there's the old parties like the UN and SLFP, they all actually dislodged practically in the last election which took place in Sri Lanka in 2020. 2019 was presidential election and 2020 followed by the parliamentary election. So now you have these various kind of coalitions coming together in temporary alliances, and these kind of alliances keep on shifting. So what you have today is that because the nature of the alliance, these kind of shifting alliances, what you actually have is that the group is in power. They actually try to follow very populistic kind of policy. So it began first when at the end of the 2009, when you had the LTTE was crushed and the Tamil conflict actually ended at that time, which I would actually say from 1983, 2009. It continued. And then the Rajapaksa, they were in power up 2015. Then Mr. Sirisena, who was actually a part of the Rajapaksa government, he defected and then formed an alliance with Mr. Wickremesinghe. And then they formed the government in 2015. And by the time you have the next election, 2019, actually there were early elections, the government was actually so badly split. If you remember that when the Easter bombing took place there in Sri Lanka, 2019, the two leaders, the president, the prime minister, were not even talking terms. So you find that this kind of a crisis developing each, and of course, when the present government, Gotabaya and Mahinda, came to power, actually it was image, so to say, but at the end of it, they also followed very short-sighted economic policies or appeasement and that sort of thing. The result was that the economy actually, and then of course you add to that the fact that you had the COVID crisis, which led to the collapse of tourism, and then the kind of, as I said, profligate economic policy with their following for such a long time, several decades practically, it all compounded to this kind of a situation of Sri Lanka defaulting on its foreign debt, being denied loans from outside, any kind of support, and leading to fuel crisis and a whole lot of other things, that a food crisis, and of course then the Ukraine situation. So you find that it is because the government was fragile, you find that one thing led to the other, leading to this kind of collapse. The result, of course, is that as a result of this, what you have actually, in a way, India helping quite considerably, and perhaps India is seen as a much more reliable friend by the Sri Lankan people and even the political parties than China or any other country. But, in our neighborhood, if a country actually in a state of collapse, is a matter of great worry for all of us.
Ambassador Kumar, as you pointed out, the problem also arises with Sri Lanka's economy, which we saw in a crisis for a long time. The foreign currency reserves, they have virtually run dry today, which means that Sri Lanka doesn't have enough funds available to buy goods from other countries. And in May, Sri Lanka also failed to make a payment on its foreign debt for the first time in its history. As you pointed out, the government in Sri Lanka has blamed the COVID pandemic, which affected Sri Lanka's tourism trade, which has always been one of the biggest foreign currency earners for the country. And we also see that a lot of people pointed out that tourists in Sri Lanka had also been frightened off by a series of deadly bomb attacks on churches in 2019. But a lot of people also point to the fact that the political leadership is to be blamed for the economic crisis in Sri Lanka, because at the end of the civil war in 2009, Sri Lanka chose to focus more on providing goods to the domestic market instead of trying to break into foreign markets. So political leadership made a lot of mistakes economically, which led to the economic crisis, and the continuing economic crisis we have seen has resulted in this political chaos in Sri Lanka. Ambassador Kumar, do you feel that, as you pointed out, India is helping Sri Lanka in its hour of need, and India has extended help in terms of monetary funds also? Do you feel that when you look at the neighborhood, and we have seen the criticism which has come Sri Lanka's way for the debts it took from China and for many of the infrastructure projects, which a lot of people felt were unnecessary, do you feel, one, Sri Lanka fell into that debt diplomacy trap of China? And India's stand, by comparison, is one of a success of neighborhood first policy, where India is extending Sri Lanka all the help possible that it can.
Yes, I think India is certainly in a better position in that sense. For example, if you remember, there were several visits between our External Affairs Minister and the Sri Lankan Foreign Minister. And the fact that a lot of aid, we have offered overall something like $5 billion. Soft loans, line of credit, currency swap, and that sort of thing. And $3.8 billion just in this year itself. And this is just half the year practically. In fact, also the Lankan Indian Oil Company have resumed fuel distribution, because that's again a problem. In fact, I was reading that now the Indian government are in talks with the Sri Lankan government, or Sri Lankan government talks with the Indian government, that in case of requirement, they can even make some urgent food supply to the Sri Lankan people. So in one way, you're right. But the political dynamic is always very different. And at the moment, you see, what I sense is that, the kind of indications you're getting from the president and the prime minister are going to resign and so on and so forth. But there's nothing upfront at the moment. On the other hand, the all parties which have been discussing in the parliament, because they will elect both the president and the prime minister now to replace the present one, and then they will constitute the cabinet. Even there, the talks have been going on, because the crisis has been developing for at least 3 months, which actually a full-fledged crisis. But yet you find that there are still some kind of maneuvering going on amongst the various political groups, and that uncertainty continues. So what you actually have now, that the opposition party, this is Sajith Premadasa, his party is called SJB, and this party also just came into existence for these elections in 2019 and 2020 parliamentary elections. So they put up their candidate, his Sajith Premadasa, that he will be the candidate for the president's position, elected. But their party has only 50 MPs. So what they're expecting are to have some kind of deals with the independent MPs, and also expecting that because of the fact that the heavy hand of the Premadasa, Rajapaksa, has disappeared from their party, which actually was set up by them just on the eve of elections. I think it is called SLPP. So the point is that they're hoping that some of the dissident MPs will join from their side and form and give them the majority votes in the parliament for Premadasa to become the president. So you find that the uncertainty is still lingering. And of course, they're saying that on 20th July, they'll have the election for the president and then for the prime minister. But you can see the situation highly politically volatile. So we don't exactly know how it's going to develop. And of course, they're saying that there should be early elections. But the issue, of course, is that in this kind of a highly volatile and a fragile political situation, what kind of election outlook do you expect? The same set of people might come again, get elected. Then they'll again have this kind of a shifting coalitions being formed. So actually, it's a situation of great uncertainty for us. Of course, Sri Lankan people realize that we are actually helping them in considerable measure. And there they can see the comparison with the Chinese and all that. But still the fact is that still a highly volatile and fluid situation. So we don't really know how things might develop in the coming weeks and months at the moment.
Ambassador Kumar, as you explained about the fragile political situation in Sri Lanka, we've also seen the Gotabaya Rajapaksa, their president. He is apparently, according to the reports we are getting, he is at the airport. He's trying to leave the country. He's also facing problems with the immigration staff blocking his exit. These are multiple reports that we have coming out of Sri Lanka. And as you pointed out, that the opposition has put up a candidate for president. Do you feel, going by whatever reports we are getting, whatever we are seeing and listening to, that the political transition in Sri Lanka will be smooth, that we can expect in the coming next few days? Can we expect a smooth political transition, or do you think there might be hiccups on the way?
Well, the Sri Lankan, I must say, Sri Lankan sort of people do have, in a way, they have the experience of coming together to face the national crisis. But as I said, that, if you see the backdrop with these fragmented political parties making shifting alliances, I think now, even more so, it's actually very important for these political parties to actually reach out to the people who are leading this mass upsurge. There are students there are some religious groups, all, Catholics, Buddhists, Christians, Hindus, a lot of them, Muslims. So, these people, unless you actually are in a position to reach out to them to see as to what they expect, to what kind of a all-party government they should be able to have, how they should prepare for the next elections. That's how I look at the situation, because, at the moment it is, in a way, let's say, it's been peaceful, because these people have occupied the presidential palace. They occupied the official residence of the Prime Minister, and they said, we are not going to vacate them unless there is a new government. So at the moment, it's all peaceful. As I said, as you can see, the news report which are coming out, the video clips and all that. But, the longer this kind of fluidity continues, the more fragile and more charged the atmosphere might get. Because there are always fringe elements. There are some of the extreme left-wing people. Some of these people have history of earlier, violent rebellion against the established government in Sri Lanka, which were actually suppressed in the 70s quite seriously. So the point is that you have that, and then of course you have the sad background recently about, the Easter bombing. So there are these kind of links which actually exist. So I think they need to work faster, and the first thing, of course, for all of them is to have a coalition and all-party government, but they should reach out to the people who actually are at the moment, because these protests which they're having actually is anti-political elite. They're against the people who have been ruling Sri Lanka, let's say, for a couple of decades. So you see, it's much more complex from that point of view. And I'm quite sure that once, let us say, this thing happens, then perhaps, then everybody is saying that the IMF, the ADB, Japanese, and of course, we are also helping where we can. But they're all saying that we cannot have a long-term kind of economic partnership with a country unless the political situation stabilizes, quite naturally. That's what you expect them to do. Along with that, there's always there's an agenda of the World Bank, the IMF, the United Nations. They have an agenda about governance reforms. So all these things actually have to come together while they're supporting Sri Lanka in economic stabilization, once you have a government which will last for some time, and then along with the economic stabilization, carry out the governance reforms. So I think I still feel that situation still remains quite uncertain, and we have to, whatever means are possible, perhaps to edge or steer the situation in such a way that it leads to greater political stability, and, that kind of a gap which exists between the top political elite and the common masses. That gap is closed by closer consultations, and therefore to, take some of the popular demands on board, and then to carry out and build trust, and then to actually go for elections.
And in the coming days, we will continue our discussions on Sri Lanka as we follow the developments there, both economic and political. With these comments, we bring today's discussion to an end. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is All India Radio giving you the news. For quick news updates round the clock, follow us on our Twitter handle at AIR News Alerts.
India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi will participate in the first I2U2 in India-Israel-UAE-USA leaders virtual summit on Thursday, along with Prime Minister of Israel Yair Lapid, President of the UAE Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, and President of the USA Joseph R. Biden. The leaders will discuss the possible joint projects within the framework of I2U2 as well as the other common areas of mutual interest to strengthen the economic partnership in trade and investment in the respective regions and beyond. These projects can serve as a model for economic cooperation and offer opportunities for the business persons and workers. I2U2 is aimed to encourage joint investments in 6 mutually identified areas such as water, energy, transportation, space, health and food security. It intends to mobilize private sector capital and expertise to help modernize the infrastructure, low-carbon development pathways for the industries, improve public health and promote the development of critical emerging and green technologies. At least 68 people have reportedly died in Pakistan's Karachi city in Sindh province and neighbouring Balochistan province as torrential rains and flash floods battered the area. As many as 63 deaths were reported in Quetta, Barkhan, Pisheen, Kohlu, Bolan, Lorelai and Zob areas in Balochistan province, while 5 people died in Karachi, the capital of Sindh province. According to a police official in Karachi, 4 men were electrocuted while 1 died due to wall collapse.
In UK, the ruling Conservative Party said that the process to replace outgoing Prime Minister Boris Johnson is set to conclude on September 5th. According to media reports, 11 candidates are vying for the job, with the voting process beginning this week. Candidates must have at least 20 MPs backing them in order to enter the race, up for the usual 8, and any candidate who fails to get the support of 30 MPs in the first ballot will be eliminated. The new Conservative leader will be chosen in a 2-stage election in which the 358 Conservative lawmakers reduce the race to 2 candidates through a series of elimination votes. Candidates who fail to get at least 30 votes are eliminated at each round. In United Kingdom, senior government officials held a crucial meeting to declare the first ever heat wave emergency in the country. The meeting was called on Tuesday as forecasters predicted the hottest day ever this weekend, with temperature expected to soar past the 40 degrees Celsius. According to the UK Health Security Agency, UKHSA, a level 4 national emergency is declared when the hot weather is so extreme that illness and death may occur among the fit and healthy as well as vulnerable people. If implemented, it could cause widespread disruption to schools, travel, health services and even nuclear power plants.
India thrashed England by 10 wickets in the opening one-day international of the 3-match cricket series at Kennington Oval in London a short while ago. Put into bat first, the hosts were bundled out for 110 in 25.2 overs. Skipper Joe Buttler scored the highest 30 runs. For the Indian team, Jasprit Bumrah took 6 wickets and Mohammad Shami 3 wickets. In reply, India chased down 111-run target in 18.4 overs without losing any wicket, riding on skipper Rohit Sharma's unbeaten 76 of 58 balls and Shikhar Dhawan's 31 not-out runs. Rohit Sharma-led Indian team has already won the 3-match T20 series against England 2-1. The BCCI has announced the Indian women's cricket team for the upcoming Commonwealth Games to be held in Birmingham from 28 July to 8th August. Harmanpreet Kaur will lead the 15-member squad. Sneh Rana, Harleen Deol and wicketkeeper Tanya Bhatia return to the team. The team will have Yashtika Bhatia as the first-choice stumper.
Indian grapplers came up with a superb performance to bag 22 medals, including 4 gold in the Asian U20 Wrestling Championships in Manama, Bahrain. Besides the 4 gold medals, India claimed 9 silver and 9 bronze medals in the event. Among the 22 medals, the women's team won 10 medals, including 3 gold through Priyanka, Arju and Antarim. Men's freestyle wrestler Sujit won the 4th gold medal for India in the 65 kilograms weight class. Sports Authority of India tweeted that India finished 2nd in the team ranking in women's wrestling, 2nd in men's freestyle and 5th in the team ranking in men's Greco-Roman competition. A report from the business desk.
The Sensex declined 509 points or 0.94% to finish at 53,887. The Nifty also slipped 158 points or 0.97% to end at 16,058. At the global stock markets, the markets fell as the prospect of further central bank tightening and worries about the health of economies worldwide dampened investor sentiment. Japan's Nikkei 225 ended 1.8% down, and Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index tumbled 1.3%. China's Shanghai Composite and South Korea's Kospi indices fell 1%. Singapore's Straits Times managed to add 0.5%. European shares also logged losses in intraday trade. Global crude oil prices fell as fresh COVID-19 curbs in China and fears of a global economic slowdown weighed on the outlook for fuel demand. Crude prices fell around 4.5% in the intraday. Brent crude was trading at $102.30 per barrel, and at the forex market, the rupee weakened 17 paise against the dollar to close at 79 rupees and 60 paise against the American unit. Gaura Dhawanlal for World News, All India Radio.
Now let us take a look at the major developments around the world as reported in the foreign press. First, we have to look at the press reports on China. Bloomberg reports close to 30 million people are under some form of movement restrictions as most cities and counties across China seek to quell the resurgence of COVID-19 outbreaks. Nikkei Asia reports China's hefty tax rebates batter COVID-hit local governments. Property crunch and virus policy heap pressure amid severe structural imbalance. Reuters writes China auto industry cuts 2022 outlook as commercial demand slumps.
Now let's have a look at the press reports on Nepal. Kathmandu Post reports that tax waiver has set off an investment rush in automobile assembly plants. Republica reports that visiting head of the International License Department of the Chinese Communist Party, Liu Qinchao, held a meeting with CPN Maoist Center chairperson Pushpa Kamal Dahal on Monday.
Now let's have a look at the press reports from Balochistan. ANI reports that the executive president of the Baloch Human Rights Council, Dr. Nasir Dashti, has said that Pakistan is moving towards an unprecedented existential crisis. Al Arabiya Post reports the Pakistan Army's hit teams are on a ruthless campaign to target young Baloch students studying in various parts of the country to brutally suppress the growing wave of protest among the youth in the Baloch community. In the past few months, over 48 Baloch students have been attacked by anonymous armed men.
Now let's have a look at the press reports from Pakistan. Associated Press of Pakistan reports that Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif on Monday directed the provincial governments and the National Disaster Management Authority for making coordinated efforts to ensure public safety and relocation of the affected people as monsoon rains battered parts of the country. Business Recorder reports that former Prime Minister and PTI Chairman Imran Khan said that an unknown power prevented the prosecution of former President Asif Ali Zardari and Chief Minister Sindh Syed Murad Ali Shah.
Now let's have a look at the press reports from Bangladesh. Bangladesh reported 9 more deaths and 656 new cases of coronavirus on Tuesday, reports Prothom Alo. The forex reserves of Bangladesh have dropped below $40 billion for the first time in over 2 years, reports Dhaka Tribune.
The first full-color image from NASA's James Webb Space Telescope was released on Monday. It provides glimpses of what the early universe looked like. U.S. President Joe Biden presented the image in an event at the White House. The clearest image to date of the early universe, going back 13 billion years, has been released and it was stunning. The image showed thousands of galaxies and some of the faintest objects observed, colorized in blue, orange and white tones.
A quick look at the headlines once again. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi inaugurates Deoghar Airport in Jharkhand, unveils series of development projects over 16,000 crore rupees. India is among the fastest growing economies in the world, says Home Minister Amit Shah. Sri Lankan President Gotabaya Rajapaksa signs his resignation letter. First I2U2 India, Israel, UAE, USA leaders virtual summit to be held on Thursday. At least 68 people die in Pakistan's Karachi city and neighbouring Balochistan province as torrential rains and flash floods batter the area. In cricket, India thrashed England by 10 wickets in opening one-day international at Kennington Oval in London. BCCI announces Indian women's cricket team for the upcoming Commonwealth Games in Birmingham. And Indian grapplers bagged 22 medals in Asian Under-20 Wrestling Championships in Manama in Bahrain. And now, before we end, let us listen to Mahatma Gandhi's favorite bhajan, Vaishnava Jan, by artists from Israel. And with that, we end this bulletin. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow with the next edition of the World News.